Hey everybody, today we are making a massaged kale salad. And this is the first way I really learned to enjoy eating kale. You know, it got very trendy there 10 or 15 years ago and everybody was doing it, and it took a while for me to figure out a way to eat it raw that I didn't hate it. But this works quite well. And so I've already stripped this kale. And then I'm just going to break this up into bite-sized pieces with my fingers. And then we'll spin it dry. With salads of any kind, having your greens dry so that the dressing actually can cling to them is really important. If they're wet, especially any dressing that's got some oil in it, it's just going to roll right off and puddle at the bottom of the bowl instead of sticking to your greens. So this recipe basically tastes like a Caesar salad in terms of the dressing, which is part of what made me decide I loved it. There is one, I have one collard leaf in here as well, just because when I was picking the kale, there was a collard leaf that was kind of shadowing the kale plant a little bit, and so I just got it out of the way. Collards are the new kale. Collards are the new trend in terms of nutrients, and we'll do some videos on that in the future. They are, you know, the traditional way of eating a collard is collard greens, usually cooked with a ham hock, and you cook it for a very long time, and so that it's basically disintegrated. And what people finally realized was if you take that center stem off of a collard leaf, it's basically like cabbage, and that you can use it raw, you can use it cooked where it just sautés for 5 or 10 minutes. You do not have to do that traditional super long cook. And so it becomes a lot more versatile when you're not having to cook something for an hour. So here's part of that collard green there. And they just, it tastes like cabbage. Actually, it tastes probably a little more like kale. It's got a little more oomph to it than a cabbage leaf would. But very edible. They do really well in the heat of summer. Kale tends to be, it'll go through the summer, but it really likes the spring and the fall the best. And collards are great through the heat of the summer. That also will last amazingly well through the winter. I've had it over winter twice now. So yeah, more on collards later. So we've broken this up into bite-sized pieces, and we're just going to spin it. This is an Oxo Salad Spinner. I've owned a bunch of salad spinners over the years. This really is worth, Oxo in general is a pretty good brand. Most of their stuff is quite good. I'm going to try to, the trick on salad spinning is balancing the load so that it actually get some good centrifugal force in there. But it's a very good salad spinner. Sorry, you probably got a little wobble on the camera with that. Takes a bit of effort. And you can see not a ton of water. Kale doesn't hang on to water, but we got some in there. And it's a little green just because I was tearing all of those cell membranes. I don't wash everything as I cook, but some things like this where really all you need to do is just rinse it out. It's nice to just wash as you go. It saves time later. All right, so there's our greens. We're gonna just set this aside, and we're gonna make our dressing in the bottom of the pan here. This recipe originally came from Eating Well magazine. I was a big subscriber to Eating Well for years, and they have, like many magazines, they have gone by the wayside. They are no longer publishing. They just ceased publishing couple of months ago. So yeah, the magazine era is dead. Everything is online. I've got more olive oil up there I need to get. Go-to recipes I've been using for years are eating well. So if I'm cooking with olive oil, I tend to use a fairly inexpensive brand. Trader Joe's has a good one. World Market has a good one, and both of those are a long way away from me, but whenever I'm in those towns, I tend to stock up. However, if I'm making something where I'm going to eat it raw, I use a better quality olive oil. So this is California Olive Ranch. This is their all-purpose. It is a blend from different countries. It used to be just from California, and then California has been in drought. They had to change their formulation, but it's really decent quality, and it's not super expensive, and so I only use it when I'm eating things raw, so in dressings and salads and that kind of thing. Okay, so for this recipe, we are going to need olive oil, lemon juice, some Parmesan cheese, some fresh ground pepper, a little bit of anchovy. Don't be afraid of the anchovy. It will not make it fishy. Anchovies are a huge source of umami, which is basically the fifth taste, and it will dissolve into the sauce. You'll never know it's there, but it will just make it so much more rich and lovely. We have garlic. A little bit of Worcester sauce, which is traditional in most Caesar recipes. It's not called for in the original recipe, but I'm going to put a little in, and a little bit of soy sauce, and some salt. And I am just going to make this recipe and with the dressing, and then put the kale in on top of it and massage it, rather than put the kale in first. I think it's easier that way. 1/2 cup Parmesan cheese. By the way, these are my favorite measuring cups. I will put a link to the Amazon site below. I've had a million. I like stainless when I'm cooking and measuring, and perfect. I've had a million stainless steel measuring cups where the handle is welded on and then it breaks off, which is maddening. These are one piece and they stack, and so you can put them in one small spot in your drawer. Best purchase ever. I will never need other measuring cups after that. So highly recommend those. 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Because I'm going to put this in a hand squeezer, I like to cut the ends off first. It helps with that. This is my compost bucket, by the way. All right. And you can usually get about 1 ounce of lemon juice per half a lemon. Depends on the lemon and its size and how juicy it is and what kind of squeezer you have. But as a rough rule of thumb, 1 ounce, which is 2 tablespoons or 1/8 of a cup per half. So you can usually get about 1/4 cup of juice for each lemon, if you're ever trying to estimate how many lemons you need for a recipe. I'm not a fan of bottled lemon juice in almost anything. It has some preservatives in it that I can taste, and you can really taste that it's been bottled. And so I really prefer fresh squeezed. Oh shoot, got some seeds in there. All right. This is another thing that I just like to rinse and put in the drying rack immediately rather than let it sit around. All right, so we need 1/4 cup of lemon juice. I'll try not to get that seed in there. See, that's going to be really close. Close enough. 3 large cloves of garlic minced. How convenient is that? Because this is the only fresh garlic I have left in the house. It's very late in the year for last year's garlic, and it's too early for this year's garlic. Although I imagine coming out of California, the garlic is probably ready to harvest, or possibly in the South. I've seen some people online harvesting garlic in Georgia and places like that. because this is slightly older garlic, it's peeling super easy. I like to use a microplane on this. This is another one of those tools that you think, is it really worth it? It is really worth it. These are great. This will really finely shave that garlic and give you a big garlic punch, which is kind of what you want in a Caesar dressing. The finer the garlic, the more flavor you're going to get out of it. So if I want something where it's not so strong, I will leave it more chunky. If I want a big hit of garlic, I will use this microplane. I also have a garlic press. I'm a fan of garlic press as well, but this is going to make it even finer than a garlic press would. Can be a little hard on the fingernails if you don't get the angle right. But you can see, like, this isn't going to cut you. It's very fine. I could lean this on the bowl, but if I did that, I would probably end up knocking the bowl over because that's how much grace I have. All right. The real key to microplaners in terms of cleaning them is to immediately wash them after you're done using them. Do not let this sit in your sink and dry out, or it will be really hard to get stuff off of. If you wash it immediately, nothing will stick, and it takes like 15-20 seconds to rinse it, and you're done. Simple. All right. Tablespoon of soy sauce. I think I'm going to split that because I think they're putting soy sauce in here in place of the Worcestershire. So I'm going to do probably 2 teaspoons and then add a little bit of Worcestershire. Worcestershire is very strong. It's not something that you want to do a tablespoon of very often, but there we go. Just enough to get a little bit of that extra umami. My bowls are very ringy today. All right. Else. 1 minced anchovy fillet. These are kind of gooey. They're no longer really whole because they're down towards the bottom. I'm going to assume that's going to be about a 1/2 teaspoon. So I'm just going to scoop out a 1/2 teaspoon of anchovy mush. Seriously, you guys, this, I know it smells really fishy, like the worst tuna, but it is so good. And you can see that's just dissolved. I'm just going to throw that in there. Yeah, you will not taste this, but it's going to add so much flavor to your dish. This is one of those things I'm just going to wash right away because I don't want to forget that that has anchovy oil on it and use it for something that I don't want that flavor in. So I'm just going to immediately rinse that stinky fish oil off of there. Okay. Turns out I didn't need that. 1/4 or 1/2 teaspoon freshly ground black pepper. Hard to judge that. I'm just going to eyeball it, but pretty good amount. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. This is Redmond's real salt. It's a little bit chunky, and so I tend to break it up with my fingers just to make sure there isn't a big piece of salt in there. If you were using kosher salt, I would double the amount. Kosher is a lot bigger grains, and so it's going to take up a lot more space in a spoon to get the same amount. And then 1/3 cup olive oil. The other thing I'm going to add here, even though it's not called for in the original recipe, is about a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. That is going to help everything emulsify because mustard is a natural emulsifier. And I have an old Caesar salad recipe from that I grew up with that had mustard in it, so I know it's a good addition. So I'm going to add a little bit of Dijon. And then we need 1/3 cup of olive oil. 1/3 cup of olive oil isn't a lot. This is an eating well recipe. They tended to be a little more aware of calories. It's meant to be strongly flavored. It's not meant to be super smooth and creamy and rich. Although you could certainly add more oil if it was too strong for you. Most salad dressings are somewhere at least double the amount of oil to the other ingredients, and oftentimes 3 or 4 times the amount. But the more acidic you want it to taste, the less olive oil you use. I'm going to just mix everything else in here first. Get this going. All right. And I'm just slowly drizzling that olive oil in to create a bit of an emulsification. Because we put that mustard in there, it's going to stay, the oil and the lemon juice are going to mix together and stay together better. They won't stay together forever, but they're going to stay together better than if we didn't put that mustard in there. All right, so there is our lovely dressing. I am going to give it a quick... Definitely quite acidic. But one of the things I've really learned with kale is it does well with really strong flavors. And so, like garlic, onions, acid of some kind, often vinegar or lemon juice. All right. Now we're going to add in our greens. And I'm going to, if I see some big chunks, I'm going to kind of break them up again. Nobody wants a big stringy piece. And the original recipe here calls for massaging, which is basically just getting your hands in there and bruising the leaves. And you can do that, especially if you're in a hurry to serve this. A lot of that is going to happen just by everything being mixed together, if you give it some time. And so rather than doing a ton of massaging, I'm just gonna stir this together and then let it sit. We're actually going to a barbecue potluck later today, and by the time we're ready to do that, this is gonna be very nicely wilted and tender. Ironically, because I normally really love getting my hands in things, greasy, anchovy-laden kale leaves is not really one of them. I'm one of those people that eats with my fingers a lot. I really love things like green beans and asparagus just eaten with my fingers. I'll do a shot of this later, showing you how much it's wilted down. I could have used a bigger bowl here. This will shrink down quite a bit, but right now it's a little chunky. And you can see it's already wilting down a little bit just from that acid. As we get that dressing well distributed on this. And if you wanted to treat this more like a real Caesar salad, you could easily do croutons on this, or some slivered egg would be good, hard-boiled egg. I'm not sure what all I'm going to put on here yet. I haven't really decided. Dried fruit is good. Dried cranberries is excellent in any kind of a kale salad. So that would be a good addition. Walnuts would be a good addition. So if you're kind of straying away from traditional Caesar flavors, you could definitely add nuts and dried fruit to this. Or obviously for a weeknight dinner, a grilled chicken breast cut up in this would be great. Yeah, see how much that's wilted just in the last couple minutes? All right, so that's pretty well blended. I'm just going to cover that and throw it in the fridge and let it do its thing, and then we'll give it another toss before we leave, so in an hour or so. All right, so here's our salad. It's been sitting, how long has this been sitting? Maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Probably about an hour and a half. And you can see how much that's shrunk down just from sitting in the dressing without a lot of active massaging. I can kind of massage it a little bit with the tongs if I need to. And then I decided that I'm going to put some cranberries, dried cranberries, and also some toasted sunflower seeds in this. So that's going to be my finishing touches, just because I'm taking it to a potluck. And that's going to make it look really pretty. So I'm not going to measure here, just a good handful of dried cranberries. Prettier bowl to put that in. This is my favorite way to toast nuts. You always see things talking about toasting in a skillet, and that is so fiddly to me, and it's so easy to accidentally burn things that I have been for many, many years just using my toaster oven, and you kind of get a feel for what it needs to be set on. This is a very light toast because these are small, but it's a great way to toast nuts of any kind, seeds of any kind, without having to fiddle a lot with stuff. I can be doing other things while this is happening, which is much easier than stirring it in a skillet. These were in my fridge. I keep all of my nuts either in the freezer or in the fridge because they have so much oil in them, and it's usually unsaturated oil, which means they go rancid really fast. And if you've ever opened up a jar of rancid stored nuts that you have, you know immediately because they stink. It's very distinct and they don't taste good. And so I keep sunflower seeds and pepitas, which is pumpkin seeds, in my fridge in a jar. And then walnuts, pine nuts, hazelnuts, pecans, cashews, all of those tend to live in my freezer when I'm not cooking with them. But it also means that when you toast them, it takes just a little bit longer because they're starting out frozen. I can see those are getting just a tiny bit of color on them. There we go, perfect. So see how those have got just a little bit of color? Depending on how thin they were, that's perfect. And I didn't have to, I could have been doing something else while these were cooking. This cookie sheet looks terrible. It's clean, it's just stained. It's harmless. All right, I'm gonna give this one more good stir. Tossy, tossy. And then we're gonna make it pretty for potluck guests. Try not to get it all over my kitchen. So there you have it, massaged kale Caesar salad. In this case with toasted sunflower seeds and dried cranberries. Beautiful.